A guy leaps from a commercial airliner at 10,000 feet, plunges straight into a freezing pitch-black storm, and just vanishes. Literally disappears from the face of the earth. No body, no parachute, and the millions of dollars he took? Poof. Gone. Today, we're decoding the source material behind the absolute greatest, and honestly, the only, unsolved skyjacking case in aviation history. We are getting into the unbelievable true story of the Phantom himself, D.B.Cooper.
Okay, let's dive into this, because I know it sounds like a movie plot, but this isn't fiction. This is the single most perplexing mystery in flight history. We're talking about a mid-air heist that has utterly baffled the FBI and the world's best investigators for decades. A man, a parachute, a massive bag of ransom money, and zero conclusive traces left behind. Seriously, how does a human being just evaporate from the sky?
So let's set the scene. It's November 24th, 1971. Thanksgiving Eve in the U.S. Everyone's rushing around the airport, totally normal holiday chaos, right? Well, at Portland International, this incredibly ordinary-looking guy walks up to the counter. He's got on a cheap black suit, a crisp white shirt, a black tie, and dark sunglasses. He looks exactly like your average corporate guy heading home for turkey. He walks right up and calmly buys a one-way ticket, under the name Dan Cooper. He hops on Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 heading to Seattle and settles into seat 18C. And as the plane takes off, Cooper is just the picture of total relaxation. I mean, he even orders a drink. To the crew and the folks sitting around him, there are absolutely zero red flags. Nobody on that plane has any idea that in just a matter of minutes, this quiet dude in 18C is going to turn the whole world upside down. Right after takeoff, Cooper flags down a young flight attendant, Florence Schaffner, as she's walking by. He quietly slips her a little folded piece of paper. Now, Florence, she's probably used to businessmen trying to flirt, so she figures he's just giving her his phone number. She drops it into her purse without even looking at it. But Cooper sees this. He leans in and in this chillingly calm, slow voice goes, "Miss, look at that note closely. I have a bomb." You can imagine the blood just instantly drains from her face. Shaking, she pulls the note back out. The instructions are crystal clear. He's got a bomb, and he wants her in the seat directly next to him. When she sits down, Cooper just casually cracks open his briefcase, just enough for her to peek inside. And right there, staring up at her, are these red cylinders wired all together. This wasn't some bluff. That explosive device was the real deal. And the tension on that flight went from 0 to 100 in a split second.
So, the crucial point is what he asked for next, because his demands were totally unlike your typical desperate criminal. Once he had everyone's attention, he laid out exactly what he needed to keep everyone alive. First up, when they land in Seattle, he wants a massive payout. $200,000 in cash. But here's the kicker. He was incredibly specific. He demanded that entire fortune exclusively in unmarked $20 bills.
And as if the highly specific cash demand wasn't wild enough, his next request left everyone completely scratching their heads. He asked for 4 parachutes. Not 1, 4. And what makes this whole phase of the hijacking so fascinating is how he acted. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't acting frantic. Actually, scratch that. He was bizarrely polite. While the plane circled Seattle so the FBI could scramble to get the cash and the chutes, Cooper calmly paid his drink tab and, get this, even thoughtfully ordered meals for the flight crew. Okay, so eventually they touch down in Seattle. The FBI manages to deliver the $200,000 and the 4 parachutes to the plane. And true to his word, acting totally cool and collected, Cooper lets all 36 passengers off the plane. Safely. Not a single person hurt. So now, the plane is sitting on the tarmac, and it's eerily quiet. The only people left on board are Dan Cooper and 4 members of the flight crew. Now that the cabin's empty, Cooper essentially takes over as captain. He gives the pilot these highly specific, intensely calculated flight instructions. First, fly south towards Mexico. Second, keep the airspeed extremely low. And third, maintain an altitude of exactly 10,000 feet. You see, these aren't just random off-the-cuff requests. These are the instructions of a guy who clearly knows aviation inside and out, and knows exactly what the specific Boeing 727 is physically capable of. So they take off again. It's roughly 8 p.m., and the conditions outside are just an absolute nightmare. It's pitch black. There is a massive, severe winter storm raging, just pounding the plane with heavy snow and freezing rain. And right below them, it's not a warm, well-lit city. It's the vast, treacherous, super dense Washington forest. It is quite literally a death trap out there. As they're flying over this totally desolate landscape, Cooper tells the flight crew to go lock themselves inside the cockpit. So now he's totally alone in the dim cabin. Cooper starts making his final prep. He grabs this massive bag of 20s. And just to put this into perspective, that cash weighed about 21 kilos. That's like strapping a huge sack of dog food to your chest and ties it right to his body. He throws on one of the parachutes, then he walks to the back of the plane and does the unthinkable. Mid-flight, he literally opens the plane's rear door. Up in the locked cockpit, the pilot suddenly feels this sharp, violent jolt in the cabin pressure. The whole plane kind of shifts its balance. It was the undeniable physical proof that something huge had just gone down. Cooper had leaped from the rear staircase, jumping straight into the freezing, chaotic void of the storm below, attempting an escape that logically should have been completely impossible. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer, overwhelming scale of the reaction. When that plane finally landed and the cops stormed the cabin, it was totally empty. He really had vanished into thin air. By the very next morning, the FBI kicked off Operation Hjacked, the largest search operation in history. We're talking thousands of soldiers, multiple intelligence agencies, fleets of helicopters, and tracking dogs tearing through the Washington woods. They searched for months. The result? Absolutely nothing. Zero. No body, no parachute, no money, not even a shred of clothing. For almost a full decade, the trail was just ice cold. Investigators were completely stumped. I mean, the world kind of moved on, but the mystery of what happened that night in 1971 just hovered there. Then, 9 long years later, in 1980, a completely random, shocking discovery reignited the whole investigation and slapped D.B.Cooper's name right back onto the front pages. Here's what happened. It's 1980, and this 8-year-old kid is playing in the sand by the river at a spot called Tina Bar. This is right on the edge of the wilderness where Cooper supposedly jumped. The kid's digging around and unearths this rotting, decaying bag buried in the ground. When the authorities pull it open, they are floored. Inside this crumbling bag is exactly $5,800 in cash. Because this wasn't just some random buried treasure. When investigators checked the serial numbers on those $20 bills, they matched perfectly. It was a 100% match with the records of the ransom money they gave Cooper back on the tarmac in Seattle. Mind-blowing, right? It was undeniable proof that his loot actually made it to the ground. But honestly, it just created way more questions. If this was $5,800, where was the other $194,200? And more importantly, where was the man himself? That single discovery practically split the entire investigation into two completely opposite camps. On one hand, you have the folks who firmly believe that jump was a death sentence, that Cooper died on impact or froze to death, and his body was just swallowed up by wild animals. But on the other hand, plenty of experts look at those highly technical flight instructions and think, no way, this guy was a pro. An experienced ex-military paratrooper who survived the drop, navigated the woods, changed his name, and lived out his days in absolute luxury. Even with that physical trunk of cash in hand, the case just hit a brick wall. For 45 agonizing years, the FBI kept the D.B.Cooper file wide open. They ran down literally thousands of leads, they interviewed and interrogated countless suspects, but they just never found that one definitive piece of evidence to prove who Dan Cooper really was or what really happened after he walked down those stairs into the dark. Finally, in 2016, after exhausting pretty much every resource on Earth, the FBI was forced to officially close the book on the case. Which leaves us right back at the ultimate, unresolved question that makes this explainer so endlessly fascinating. Did D.B.Cooper actually survive that jump? Was he just some overconfident guy who got completely consumed by the unforgiving Washington wilderness? Or was he an absolute mastermind who pulled off the single greatest vanishing act in modern history? Looking at all the facts we've just covered from the source material, what do you think really happened out there in the dark? Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the impossible.